I sat in the corner of the table, the red wine in my hand catching the chandelier's shimmer like blood under crystal. Laughter bounced off the walls, sharp and jagged, slicing through the air. Daniel raised his glass, his voice a blade. "Another month of unemployment, huh, sweetie? Maybe try a coffee shop gig." His buddies, Liam, Carter, and Owen, erupted in laughter. Their suits were crisp, their grins wide. Glasses clinked, a toast to my failure. I dipped my head, letting my hair curtain my face, feigning the sting they expected. Their amusement gleamed brighter than the light overhead. They didn't know. How could they? Daniel, my husband, the vice president of Aurora Tech, lounged in his arrogance. Liam smirked over his whiskey, Carter chuckled into his sleeve, and Owen leaned back like a king they thought ruled the room, the company, the world. Senior executives, untouchable, basking in their power. I sipped my wine, the taste sharp on my tongue, masking the faintest curl of a smile. They had no idea who I was. My name is Elena Vasquez. I'm 37. I built Aurora Tech from a single idea in a cramped apartment into a tech giant dominating the market. I'm the CEO, the founder, the one who signs their checks, approves their bonuses, green lights their bloated egos. And Daniel, he's my husband. For 6 years, I've played this game, pretending to be the struggling wife, the nobody he props up with his paycheck. Tonight, he wielded me like a punchline, same as always. "Who knows? You might get lucky," he crowed, and the table roared again. I traced the rim of my glass with a finger, cool and steady. They didn't know that in a few hours, their smug little empire would crack wide open. The titles they flaunted, mine to strip away. The contracts they bragged about, mine to redirect. Aurora Tech wasn't theirs. It was mine, always had been. I'd watched them strut for years, blind to the woman in the corner, the one who'd been pulling strings while they laughed. Daniel caught my eye, his grin faltering for a split second. Maybe a flicker of unease he couldn't place. I smiled back, soft and submissive, the way he liked. "Enjoy your night, gentlemen," I said, my voice low, a whisper under their noise. They didn't hear the edge. They didn't sense the cliff they were dancing on. Tomorrow, everything changes. Tomorrow, I step out of the shadows. For now, I let them laugh. Let them drink. Let them think they've won. The wine was bitter, but victory, that would taste sweeter. 6 years ago, I met Daniel Mercer. I was 31, fresh off founding Aurora Tech in secret, a startup no one knew about yet, least of all him. He was 34, charming, a rising star at a rival firm. I could have told him the truth. I'm Elena Vasquez, a businesswoman with a company already turning heads. Instead, I lied. I said I was a freelance marketing analyst, scraping by on odd jobs, still finding my footing. He bought it, hook, line, and sinker, asked me out that night. 6 months later, we were married. It was an experiment. I'd built Aurora from nothing. Late nights, endless pitches, a gamble that paid off. But I wanted to see who Daniel really was, what he'd do if he thought I had no power, no status. So I rented a modest apartment, drove a beat-up Honda, dressed in quiet humility. He didn't question it at first. He was warm, supportive. "You'll figure it out, Elena," he'd say, arm around my shoulders, eyes soft. I'd nod, hiding the smirk, knowing my company was already outpacing his. That kindness didn't last. Aurora grew silently under my real name. Through shell companies, he never connected to me. I kept it hidden, feeding him stories of failed gigs, lost clients. He started to shift. The encouragement faded, replaced by impatience, then pity. "Freelancing's tough," he'd mutter, scrolling his phone, barely looking up. I'd murmur agreement, folding laundry in our small living room, while in my office downtown, I was signing multi-million-dollar deals. I let him think he was the breadwinner, the hero. He moved up, joined Aurora Tech as VP, a job I approved through layers of anonymity. He never suspected. I watched him change, saw the man behind the mask emerge. The experiment worked too well. By the time I was 37, he didn't just pity me. He despised me, a wife with no career, no ambition, unworthy of his pride. I stayed quiet, letting the lie grow, letting him build his throne on sand. Because I knew something he didn't. I wasn't the one who'd fall. The shift wasn't sudden. It crept in slow and ugly over years. Daniel thrived on it, on being the savior in our story. By 40, he was Aurora Tech's golden boy, strutting in tailored suits, flashing a Rolex I'd indirectly paid for. I was still the freelancer, the lucky wife he supported. Our apartment stayed modest. He liked the narrative, the humble king. But the warmth was gone. He'd come home, toss his keys on the counter, barely glance at me. "Rough day?" I'd ask. "You wouldn't get it," he'd snap, pouring a scotch. Dinners with his crew, Liam, Carter, Owen, became the stage. They'd gather at our place or some upscale spot, all sharp ties and sharper tongues. I'd sit there, quiet, the prop in his play. "Elena's still chasing that big break," he'd say, smirking, and they'd laugh, a chorus of hyenas. I'd nod, pick at my food, let them think I was embarrassed. Inside, I was counting every jab, every sneer. Liam would chime in, "Maybe retail's hiring." Carter would snort. Owen would raise a glass. Daniel loved it, the spotlight, the power. Tonight was peak performance. The chandelier gleamed, the wine flowed, and Daniel held court. "Coffee shop assistant," he said, eyes glinting, voice loud enough to carry. "Might be your speed, sweetie." The table exploded, Liam slapping the wood, Carter choking on his drink, Owen grinning like a shark. I lowered my head, hair shielding my face, playing the part. They didn't see my grip tighten on the glass, didn't feel the air shift. I raised it to my lips, slow, deliberate, tasting the bite of it. They were blind. Those promotions they bragged about, I'd signed them. The budgets they controlled, I approved them. Aurora Tech was my creation, my machine, and they were cogs I'd placed. Daniel thought he held me up, but I'd been holding him, his career, his life, for years. I set the glass down, soft clink against the table. "Enjoy it, Daniel," I murmured, too low for them to catch. He didn't need to hear it yet. Tomorrow, the curtain lifts. 6 years of his contempt, his games. I'd watched, waited, let him dig his grave. Tonight, he toasted my failure, oblivious to the empire beneath my feet. I smiled, small, secret, the kind he'd never notice. They laughed on, drunk on their own noise, while I sat in the corner, steady, ready. The shift was over. His reign was done. The shift in Daniel's behavior was my signal. Years of mockery had peeled back his mask, but suspicion wasn't enough. I needed proof, something ironclad to shatter his world and his cronies with it. 2 years ago, at 35, I started digging. It began with whispers, overheard boasts at those dinners, offhand comments about side deals and perks. Daniel and his crew, Liam, Carter, Owen, were sloppy, too comfortable in their power at Aurora Tech. I'd built the company to be a titan, but they were gnawing at its bones. I couldn't let it stand. I hired private investigators, the best money could buy, discreet, ruthless, invisible. They tailed Daniel first, shadowing him to late-night meetings in dimly lit bars, places he'd never take me. Photos came back, him shaking hands with executives from rival firms, passing envelopes under tables. Then Liam, caught at a yacht party funded by Aurora's accounts, grinning with suppliers who'd overcharged us for years. Carter and Owen followed. Secret lunches, golf courses, deals whispered over cigars. The evidence piled up, a paper trail of greed I could have framed and hung on my wall. But I didn't stop there. Suspicion had teeth now, and I gave it claws. I installed a surveillance system within Aurora Tech's own infrastructure, an invisible net woven into emails, servers, phone lines. Unnoticed, it reported to me, not Daniel, though he'd never suspect it. The data flowed, leaked bid prices to competitors, contracts rigged for kickbacks, company funds siphoned into offshore accounts. One email from Daniel to Liam stood out. "Keep HR quiet. She's replaceable." about a junior staffer who'd complained of harassment. They'd buried her like they buried anyone who didn't bow. What I uncovered wasn't just corruption, it was rot. They weren't content skimming profits. They were selling Aurora's secrets piece by piece to line their pockets. Text messages bragged about it. Owen to Carter, another million in the bag. They'll never trace it. Video clips showed Liam mocking subordinates in meetings, his voice dripping with disdain. I found audio of Daniel on a call, laughing about keeping the wife in the dark, while he planned a bonus for himself with stolen funds. Every file, every recording was a brick in the wall I'd build to crush them. I sat in my hidden office downtown, the city's hum faint through the glass, sifting through it all. 2 years of this, watching, waiting, documenting, had turned suspicion into a weapon. I had enough to send them to jail, but that wasn't the plan. Not yet. Aurora Tech was mine, and I'd reclaim it first. Strip them bare before the world. The investigators asked if I wanted more, but I shook my head. This is plenty. I needed one last piece, though, proof of their culture, their cruelty, straight from the source. So I decided to step into their lair myself, not as Elena Vasquez, but as someone they'd never suspect. The trap was set, and they'd walk right in. The evidence was a vault, locked and loaded. But I craved the raw truth of their world, how they treated the powerless, the ones they deemed beneath them. At 37, I crafted Sophie Miller, a struggling nobody with a fake resume, modest suit, slightly scuffed shoes. I applied to Aurora Tech, my own company, for a low-level marketing job. The application went through HR, people I'd hired but who'd never seen my face. Days later, an email pinged, interview scheduled. 8th floor, Tuesday. I smiled. They had no idea. I walked into the conference room, hair pulled back, shoulders hunched just enough. 3 faces I knew stared back. Liam, Carter, Owen, Daniel's inner circle sprawled in their chairs like judges at a circus. Liam flipped through my resume, sneering. Unemployed for a while, huh, Sophie? His tone was a jab, testing me. I nodded, voice soft. Timid. Yes, it's been tough finding the right fit. Carter leaned forward, sizing me up, a smirk tugging his lips. Market's brutal. We get hundreds better than this. Owen didn't bother hiding his boredom, scrolling his phone while I spoke. They didn't ask about skills or experience, just probed for weakness, something to mock. I fed it to them, stumbling over answers, letting my hands fidget. Liam cut in sharp. Why should we bother with you? I mumbled about hard work, dedication, words they didn't care to hear. Halfway through, their phones buzzed, one after another. Owen chuckled, glancing at the screen. You've got to be kidding, he muttered, smirking at Liam. I didn't need to look. Daniel had texted them, probably watching from his office, laughing at Sophie the loser his wife could have been. They grinned wider, feeding off it. The interview lasted 15 minutes, but they spent 10 tearing me apart. Carter flicked my resume aside like trash. We'll be in touch, he said, voice dripping with fake pity. Liam stood, already dismissing me. Owen didn't even look up. I thanked them, head bowed and shuffled out, the perfect picture of defeat. The door clicked shut behind me, and I straightened, a faint smile breaking through. I didn't need their callback. I'd seen it all, their contempt, their casual cruelty, the toxic swamp they'd made of my company. Back in my car, I shed Sophie like a skin. The worn shoes kicked off, her heels stashed under the seat. They thought they'd humiliated me, but I'd walked away with gold, first-hand proof of their rot, the culture they'd built on disdain. It matched the files, the harassment, the power trips. Only now it was personal. I'd felt their scorn, and it fueled me. The trap was closing, and they were too blind to hear it snap. The evidence was locked tight, the undercover job, a final nail. I had everything I needed to end them. The next morning, I didn't slip in as Sophie Miller through some back door. I walked through Aurora Tech's main lobby, heels clicking on marble, past employees who nodded politely, unaware of the storm I carried. At 37, I'd spent years in the shadows, but today I'd step into the light. The boardroom was ready. Shareholders summoned, executives gathered. A massive screen loomed behind my chair. I sat at the head, calm, a thick folder in front of me, waiting. The doors swung open, and Daniel strode in, 40 and smug, his crew, Liam, Carter, Owen, trailing like loyal dogs. They thought this was routine, another meeting to applaud their genius. Daniel settled into the VP's seat, flashing that grin I'd come to loathe. Then he saw me. His eyes flickered. Confusion, a crack in the mask. Liam raised an eyebrow. Carter shifted. Owen smirked, still clueless. No one spoke. They didn't understand yet, couldn't fathom why Daniel's unemployed wife sat at the helm. I let the silence stretch, heavy, suffocating. "Sit down, Daniel," I said, voice cold, cutting through the room like glass. "You and your friends will want to hear this." He hesitated, jaw tight, but obeyed. His crew followed suit, chairs scraping awkwardly. I leaned forward, locking eyes with him, every trace of the timid Elena he knew gone. "Before we begin, I'd like to reintroduce myself." A pause, deliberate, letting it sink in. "I am Elena Vasquez, founder and CEO of Aurora Tech." The air vanished. Daniel's face drained. Liam's smirk froze. Carter's hands twitched. Owen's phone slipped from his grip. Shock rippled. Then panic. I clicked a button, and the screen blazed to life. Emails, texts, recordings, transactions, a flood of their sins laid bare. "For 2 years, I've gathered evidence of your misconduct," I said, tone unwavering, each word a hammer. "Every illegal deal, every dollar you stole, every secret you sold to rivals." Screenshots flashed. Daniel's kickback emails, Liam's yacht receipts, Carter's bid-rigging texts, Owen's harassment clips. Gasps rose from the shareholders. "I have it all. Your abuse of power, your lies, even the way you crushed anyone who dared speak up." Daniel's mouth opened. No sound came out. He was drowning. "You thought you were untouchable," I continued, standing now, my presence filling the room, "but only because I let you think that." I picked up the termination papers, signed them with a steady hand, 4 crisp sheets, one for each of them, and slid them across the table. "Effective immediately, you're fired from Aurora Tech." Daniel shot up, face red, voice a snarl. "You can't do this. I'm the VP. I built this place." I cut him off, sharp, final. "You built nothing. I created this company. I hired you. I let you into my life. And now I'm throwing you out." He staggered back, eyes wild, turning to Liam, Carter, Owen for backup. They shrank, heads down, abandoning him. The folder stayed closed. I didn't need to open it. The screen spoke enough. "Security's waiting," I said, nodding to the doors. They creaked open. Uniformed figures stepped in. Daniel trembled, staring at me like I was a stranger. He'd mocked me for years, but now I was the one he feared. I didn't flinch. "Leave quietly, Daniel, before I make this worse." The room held its breath as their reign ended, and mine began. The boardroom doors shut behind them, security leading Daniel and his crew out like broken toys. I didn't watch them go. I didn't need to. From the upper floors, I glimpsed the lobby through glass panels. Employees clustered, whispering, peering, as the once mighty execs were escorted past. Daniel's head hung low. Liam's swagger was gone. Carter and Owen trailed like ghosts. News spread fast, a wildfire through Aurora Tech. By noon, financial outlets erupted, headlines screaming, "Purge at Aurora Tech, VP and execs axed in corruption sting." Social media lit up, digging into their past, unearthing stories of arrogance and abuse. I hadn't even touched it. Their fall was swift, brutal, deserved. Within hours, Daniel's access to Aurora systems was cut. His office packed into boxes by staff who'd once feared him. Liam, Carter, and Owen faced the same. Belongings dumped curbside, security badges voided. Rival firms called, but not to hire. Nobody wanted the stench of their disgrace. A week later, word trickled back. Daniel's wife filed for divorce, taking what little he had left. Liam's trophy girlfriend bailed. Carter's house hit the market. Owen's lawyers scrambled to dodge lawsuits. They crumbled one by one, their luxurious lives unraveling like cheap thread. Aurora Tech didn't stumble, it soared. The purge was a signal, a cleansing. Stock prices ticked up by midday. Investors buzzed with confidence in my sudden leadership. Contracts I'd held back flooded in. Partners who'd shunned us under Daniel's reign now clamored to sign. The boardroom silence turned to applause after they left. Shareholders shaking my hand, stunned but grateful. I'd cut the cancer out, and the body healed fast. Employees lingered in the halls, eyes wide, some smiling, relief replacing years of tension. I stood in my office that night, the city's skyline glinting beyond the window, the weight of 6 years lifting. Daniel was nothing now, a name erased from Aurora's legacy. His crew, too, footnotes in a cautionary tale. I hadn't just won. I'd reclaimed what was mine, not with cruelty, but with precision. The folder of evidence sat on my desk, untouched since the meeting. I'd send it to the SEC later, let the law finish them. For now, it was enough to see their empire turned to ash, while mine rose stronger. This wasn't the end, though. It was a beginning. Aurora Tech had been theirs to poison, but now it was mine to rebuild. I'd rooted out the rot, and tomorrow I'd plant something better. Daniel thought he'd broken me, but he'd only sharpened the blade I'd used to cut him down. The fallout settled like dust after a storm, leaving Aurora Tech raw but alive. I didn't waste time mourning Daniel's exit or his crew's collapse. There was work to do. The next day, I called an all-company meeting, stepping onto a stage in the atrium, facing thousands of employees who'd only known me as Daniel's shadow. At 37, I shed that skin. "I'm Elena Vasquez," I said, voice steady, echoing off glass walls. "Founder and CEO, we're starting over, and no one gets left behind." Murmurs rippled, then applause, tentative at first, then fierce. They'd been suffocating under Daniel's reign. Now they could breathe. Rebuilding began fast. I fired every enabler, HR drones who'd ignored harassment, managers who'd kissed Daniel's ring, their desks emptied by noon, replaced with talent I'd scouted, or wronged souls I brought back. Meera Patel was first. A 33-year-old software engineer Daniel had axed for skipping his boozy team-building nights. I called her myself. "Do you really want me back?" she asked, voice wary over the line. "I don't just want you back," I said. "I want you leading our AI team." A week later, she walked through the front doors, head high, no fear in her step. Others followed, 20 former employees pushed out by Daniel's clique, now reinstated with purpose. The culture shifted under my hands. I tore down the old rules, built new ones, transparency policies, an anonymous reporting system, ethics training for every manager, no more backroom deals, no more silence. I launched a mentorship program too, pairing veterans with new hires, especially women in tech who'd been sidelined too long. Meetings changed, no condescending snickers, just ideas, voices rising without dread. One afternoon, I passed the break room and saw Meera's team laughing over a prototype, passion in their eyes. Aurora Tech wasn't Daniel's playground anymore. It was mine, a place for creation, not destruction. Results came quick. 2 months in, we signed 3 major contracts, one with a telecom giant that had shunned us under Daniel's stench. Stock prices climbed 35%. Investors who'd wavered now clamored to back me. A Business Insider piece called me the woman who resurrected Aurora. But the numbers and headlines weren't what hit deepest. It was the quiet moments, walking halls where smiles replaced tension, knowing I'd cut the rot and planted something real. 6 months later, standing by my office window, the city sprawling under a night sky, I felt it. Peace. Aurora glowed below, floors buzzing with drive, a company reborn. Daniel faded while we rose. Word drifted back. He was 40 now, a sales clerk in a suburban electronics store, banned from tech for 3 years by his termination terms. No suits, no Rolex, just a polyester vest and a barcode scanner. His wife took everything in the divorce, left him in a cramped apartment. Friends said he'd hollowed out, weight gone, eyes vacant. A man who'd lost it all. Liam, Carter, Owen fared no better. Blacklisted, broke, their names poison in the industry. They were ghosts, irrelevant, while Aurora thrived without them. I didn't track them, didn't need to. Revenge had been the spark, but it wasn't the fire that burned brighter now, fueled by justice, by the company I'd reclaimed, and the people I'd lifted. From my office, I look back sometimes. Daniel's first smile when we met, those dinners where I swallowed his jabs, the boardroom where I broke him. It felt distant, a story I'd outgrown. I'd spent too long in his shadow, letting him think he owned me. But not anymore. The past was a closed book. The future stretched wide. Aurora's expansion proved it. We partnered with a European software firm. Mira's AI team outpaced every goal. That mentorship program grew, pulling young women from obscurity into power. I stood in a boardroom again, not for a purge, but to plan new markets, new dreams. Employees chatted in the halls, fearless, alive. That's when it clicked. True revenge isn't tearing down, it's building up. I turned Aurora into a symbol, not of Daniel's greed, but of fairness, innovation, people who wouldn't be silenced. 6 months after the fall, I leaned against my window, the city's pulse steady below. Aurora's profits hit a record, but the real win was deeper. The laughter in the break room, the trust in the air. Daniel thought he'd define me, but he'd only forged me sharper. I didn't need to see him crumble to know I'd won. I felt it in every step through these halls, every deal signed, every life I'd changed. This was my empire, my legacy, and it was only the beginning. So here's the lesson. Power doesn't belong to manipulators, but to those who earn it through grit, through truth. Success isn't a bank account, it's the mark you leave, the good you build. Daniel thrived for a while, but the truth always cuts through. I took my place, not with spite, but with strength. What do you think? Did I do right, stripping them bare to raise something better, or was there another way? I've laid my story out, yours to judge.